You're about to listen to the Dr. Dahlia Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Dahlia Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Dahlia.
And we're back on the Dr. Dahlia Show, 1-877-Dr. Dahlia, 1-877-DOCDALI. So King Charles nailed it. I mean, he spoke to Congress yesterday and got standing ovations. He was funny. He was unifying. And I like him. I like him a lot. And he played it safe, you know, as it pertains to politics, because the king is supposed to work with every prime minister that comes his way in England, and not necessarily look Tory or Labour or, you know, to be generally there as a supportive figure. And so people thought he was going to, you know, try and rip people a new one in Congress. And no, that's not his role. He's supposed to be very diplomatic. He's supposed to be, you know, looking for fans, not votes. And so it was a real nice speech. Made people laugh. It was witty, and he, I think he liked the fact that he got some laughs. And what I found extremely impressive is there's been all this talk, you know, since the Biden administration, that we can't have seniors in senior roles, that there needs to be age limits, that age is bad. And you look at what we're seeing with Trump, with King Charles, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you see individuals who are older that are just nailing it. I mean, they're active. They're eloquent, and they can play amazing roles. You know, it's interesting. If it was a younger king, if we were listening to a 25-year-old who just ascended to the throne, or you know, I don't think it would have had the same impact. You know, this is a man who's very, very wise. This is a man with direct ties to King George and the kings before him that were responsible for us claiming our independence. And I mean, he has, you know, seen a lot, been through a lot. He's a baby boomer. And I think he was born, November of 1948. And so it was really, really impressive to see how Congress took to his speech. He got standing ovations. You saw both Democrat and Republicans be supportive. Interestingly, though, I did watch a live stream where the camera was focusing on the facial expressions of the Congress people. And some of them weren't even paying attention. I mean, it looked like they were just kind of looking around, and they were, and then, it's time to stand. Some of them didn't know when to stand. Also, you know, in Parliament, when the speakers, in Great Britain, when they speak to Parliament, they address the head of Parliament. And so, you know, King Charles was addressing, you know, the Speaker of the House, the Speaker, even though he was speaking to everybody. But you saw many people just kind of tune out. There were kids. It looks like there was a field trip. And that was fantastic. I mean, what a field trip that there were kids back there that were, I think they were standing in the back row, where they were able to watch. Can you imagine being able to see the King of England? What a field trip. But there were a bunch of kids there, and you know, some of them looked like they were dazing, but nobody looked like they were on their phones. There were only a couple Congress people that looked like they were on their phones. But one thing that King Charles wanted to convey is how, you know, this 250 isn't a device, that we have incorporated many things, whether it's Supreme Court rulings, whether it's our Bill of Rights, from the Magna Carta, from British culture, from British law. And that, you know, he didn't act like he was fatherly or that he owned us, but that we're still very, very connected. And we are, and we may think we're not, because the UK is part of Europe. You know, so we think of, well, UK is closer to France than they are to us. And he just kind of, you know, conveyed that, no, actually, we're closer than you think. And us being allies is a good move. And, you know, when you got hurt, like with September 11th, we were hurt. We felt your pain. We stand by you. And that's a little bit of a different attitude than you got with Starmer. Now, mind you, they have different roles. Starmer is an elected official. And so it's all about the politics. Whereas the king, he's going nowhere. He's monarch. And then Prince William takes over. And so he doesn't have to try to get votes. He doesn't have to please one side. Because I know some people are disappointed going, oh man, he should have let Trump have it, or he should have ripped into the Democrats. No, that's not his role. His role is to do what I've been advocating for, and I think everybody, with the right mind wants, where screw the politics, quit this divisiveness. It makes no sense. And let's unify against things that are real, that are positive, that are productive. So how would that play with the Iran conflict? I think he was pretty savvy in terms of saying, look, if there's an issue, this is, we should have a united front on it. And so I looked at it as, rather than, an insult to the current administration, almost a supportive gesture to the current administration because of what Trump is trying to do with Iran and stop their nuclear capabilities. And I think, King Charles, he has seen a lot. He has seen a lot of things unfold. And I think he is, humbled by how, England could be very, very vulnerable, especially where things are in the current state. And so he's not stupid. He's not going to want to alienate America. I know Starmer is trying to play both sides and try to, appease the woke and and he's not doing well. And we don't know how much longer he's going to be in office, especially with the relationship with one of his appointees and Jeffrey Epstein. And England doesn't want the drama. They get drama. Oh, trust me, if you ever watch Parliament, it is all about drama. But they also don't want to have the divide or a civil war like America is going towards. And so I think this was excellent. Whether any of the Congress people listening are going to take it home, but it was a beautiful moment. It was probably one of the nicer moments we've seen in Congress for a while, because there's been so much, well, I'm not going to stand up and applaud Trump for trying to cure cancer, or I'm not going to, applaud Biden. But what we've seen recently in Congress is very divided. And so it was really, really nice to see what King Charles did. Camilla, Queen Consort, were there. And to see people unified for once. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOCDALI.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit, and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99799 and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99799. Again, FREE to 99799.
Hi, it's Mark Falter, host of the Financial Fitness Show. I strongly believe that no one should ever pay 1 penny more in taxes than they are legally obligated. Unfortunately, for most hardworking Americans, this just isn't the case. Why? Because most people spend more time planning next weekend's getaway than trying to ensure they're going to pay less in taxes. My financial fitness team has put together some materials that I know are going to help you. It's the Tax Savings Kit. Tax Savings Kit includes 3 things: free tax analysis, top 10 ways to pay less in taxes, and an investor's guide to taxes. Now, how do you get it? Simple. 866-764-2635. Again, 866-764-2635. I'm Mark Falter. This is Financial Fitness, making personal finance profitable.
we're back on the Dr. Dahlia Show, 1-877 Dr. Dahlia, 1-877 DOCDALI. So Jimmy Kimmel back in the news, doing something controversial and stupid. I used to be a big fan of his. He went to my same college. I love the man's show, but he just has not been really funny lately. And so what he's done to try to get more ratings and increase, I guess, viewership is to be more, comedic as it pertains to political comedy, political satire. It's fallen on a lot of deaf ears when you have more than half the country voting for Trump and not necessarily agreeing with some of his jokes. And there's a way that comedians can joke about, another president or the opposite party without causing such divide. I just saw Salvatore Maniscalco, stand-up comedian, Italian guy. He's great. He's great. And even though he talked about how stupid a lot of things are right now in the world, and it sounded like he was a conservative, he didn't necessarily ascribe to that. He didn't commit himself to that. And, he was able to touch a little bit on politics by saying nowadays we get to choose our news. President Trump is this. Okay, and then what about this station? Well, President Trump did this. Then what about this? So cancer was cured, or whatever. And he's like, okay, so I'm going to choose this station. And so he was joking about how you get to choose how you get your news. Is it going to have commentary by somebody who's Democrat or somebody Republican? And it's true. People now will get their news. You used to just get the news. And now it's differing by politics. But the way he did that was, again, not very controversial. And it was funny. You could be funny and talk politics. But Jimmy Kimmel looks like doesn't know how to be funny anymore. So he made this, I think this was last week, was it? So what he did is he tried to pretend he was doing a alternative to the annual media gala of the Correspondents' White House dinner. And in that, he made fun of Trump, calling him a delicate snowflake, things like that. And then what he said is he brought up Melania Trump, and he said, "You have a glow like an expectant widow." Now, I don't think that was really funny, all right? Because, it obviously sounded like he was alluding to, multiple attempts on her husband's life and how, she could be very easily facing that. Definitely really bad form, especially since he was so callous about Erica Kirk becoming a widow. I really found that shocking that he feels like he could go there. There's so many, and I look at this and go, oh my God, you know how you could have just done something completely different with that? You could have mocked the gala. Instead, you come up with widowship. Really? Ship, S-H-I-P, widowship. That's what you came up with? It makes no sense. And so, Melania Trump, not very happy about that. Okay. And, she urged ABC to, look into this. She goes, how many times will ABC's leadership enable Kimmel's atrocious behavior at the expense of our community? And then, of course, President Trump, said that Jimmy Kimmel should be dismissed from his role, saying he should be immediately fired by Disney and ABC. I don't know if I would necessarily fire him. I think his ratings are so bad and people don't find him funny that I think his show is going to end anyway, but you're going to martyr him if you fire him. And now people are saying, well, he should have free speech. He's a comedian. Yeah, but the other problem, though, is okay, we're not taught, this isn't being advertised as a political, a satirical show. This is being advertised as, this is like the night show. And so the FCC does have to look at fairness. The FCC is going to be looking at this because it's unfortunately, you can't just be one-sided if you're going to be a network, prime time, sort of, you can't do that. See that, there has to be equal, because people wonder, they go, why does the Five have a Democrat on there? And why does The View have a conservative? Well, because they're trying to look like they're doing fair. They're trying to be fair and balanced, even though, obviously the Democrats are usually pretty kind of tame on Fox News, and the Republicans, you probably wouldn't even call them Republicans on The View. So a U.S. regulator is going to review the Disney broadcast licenses, looking at what happened with Jimmy Kimmel, because Trump has argued that, it's not appropriate for Jimmy Kimmel to be, especially with the bad rhetoric that's going around, alluding to violence. Yeah, why would you say somebody's an expectant widow? I mean, that's just not funny. Now, Jimmy Kimmel comes out going, no, I didn't mean it like that. It was about their age difference. Really? When was the last time he joked about Trump's age? See, nobody's been joking about Trump's age because they just had Biden. That makes no sense. We know what you were alluding to. So the FCC says they are investigating Disney's ABC stations for possible violations, including unlawful discrimination. Now, a Disney spokesperson told BBC News that ABC and its stations serve the public within FCC guidelines. They say the stations have a long record of operating in full compliance with FCC rules and serving their local communities with trusted news, emergency information, and public interest programming. Our focus remains, as always, on serving viewers in the local communities where our stations operate. So the FCC order directs a company to file license renewal applications for all of its licensed TV stations within 30 days. As part of the renewal, they can require Disney to prove that they meet agency's public interest standards. The Disney-owned ABC television station licenses were not scheduled for renewal until 2028. That's why there's a lot of drama surrounding this. But here's my thing. I can't stand misinformation. I also can't stand this rhetoric. And it's coming from, Jeffrey's Maximum Warfare and Maxine Waters. And all you hear is people saying fight and, just we need to attack and we need to get bloody and we need to, that's all you keep on hearing, from people. But you're stepping over the line when this is supposed to be a show that's supposed to be for everybody. It's one thing if you are going to listen to somebody who is, a congressman, and which, by the way, they shouldn't be doing that. But they're very obvious about their intentions. When you're looking at a network show with FCC guidelines, it starts to really get a little tricky. I would not fire Jimmy Kimmel over the stupid joke. It just wasn't funny. And do I really think he was asking for people to make her a widow? I don't. I don't. But I just don't know how this guy is still on air when he's not funny and his ratings stink. I just don't get it. And they're going to martyr him. They're going to make it look like he is such a hero, and then he's going to get more ratings. And it's like, come on, man. Just do good. And I understand, no one liked the Man Show. They thought it was misogynistic and all that. I thought the Man Show was funny. Jimmy Kimmel does have some talent. Just go back to it. But political satire, can be done without getting yourself fired, without violating FCC guidelines. You could make jokes about politics very easily and not alienate half the country. I still find that ridiculous how people will have no problem alienating, more than half of the country, thinking our ratings are going to be fine. It's not. They're not. Then you look at Yellowstone and you see some of these, Taylor or Sheridan shows skyrocketing because conservatives are like, we have power too. Okay? We have rating power too. So, my recommendation to Jimmy Kimmel is, it was a stupid comment, especially since just days later, Melania was sitting next to her husband and could have seen him assassinated, and she could have been at risk. This guy, Cole Allen, allegedly didn't seem to care who was going to get hurt in his mission to stop the administration. That's a problem. And being that this happened, it was ill-timed. And I think he should apologize. And there's a way for him to apologize. He didn't want to apologize. He was like, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. But honestly, he could. Well, and he's in this position. Again, it's not going to be funny, but it's because he went where he shouldn't have gone. But he could very easily say, Melania, I didn't mean it that way. And I am sorry if it came out that way. And we definitely do not want you widowed. And it was insensitive. And move on. He can move on. Yeah, but he's not very creative, or his writers aren't creative. His writers suck. I got to tell you, when you see potential and nobody using it, it stinks. 1-877 Doc Dolly. Don't go away.
Looking for a gift that can actually help secure someone's future? It's Mark Falter's new book, Common Sense Income Strategies. It makes the perfect gift for that special someone in your life. Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using time-tested strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. To learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Secure your future with Common Sense Income Strategies by Mark Falter. Again, to learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635.
We're back on the Dr. Dolly Show, 1-877 Dr. Dolly, 1-877 DOCDALI. So in breaking news today, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that Louisiana is going to have to redraw its congressional map. This was a landmark voting rights case, and for those of us following it, this can have a lot of implications on future gerrymandering. So Louisiana versus Calais looked at if legislators can redraw districts based on race. And so lawmakers wanted to ensure that Black voters were adequately represented. And so there was a district that was predominantly Black to aid Black voters to have proper representation. The issue, though, was Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. When we look at the Constitution, you cannot discriminate based on race, color, or creed. And so you can't make a district. You're supposed to make a district based on population. But the gerrymandering that's been occurring, for decades now, even centuries, in America, were not supposed to happen to the degree of, they're Democrat versus Republican. That really isn't legal. That's not what the Constitution allows. But what the Constitution specifically states, however, in the Voting Rights Act, what the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits is you doing this based on race, saying we're going to have an all-white congressional district, or we're going to have an all Latino. Now, if it ends up to be predominantly Latino, or predominantly Black, or predominantly, as long as that wasn't forced or manipulated. And so the Supreme Court was divided 6-3, the conservative judges in the majority, and then the 3 dissenting liberal-leaning judges. And, basically where this started was, I think, back in 2020. After the 2020 census, the Republican-controlled state legislature, according to The Guardian, drew a new congressional map in which Black voters comprised a majority in at least one district. However, people were concerned that Black voters took up a third of the state's population. So a group of black voters sued the state in 2022 under the Voting Rights Act, arguing that the map diluted the influence of black voters in the state by packing them into one district and spreading them out over the remaining ones. So they were concerned in Louisiana about gerrymandering, where there would be more of a manipulation of the vote. And so the black voters back in 2022 won the case. A federal judge blocked Louisiana from using the map and instructing the state to draw a new one with a second majority black district. The state complied, drawing a new map with a second majority black congressional district, and that stretches diagonally across the state from Shreveport to Baton Rouge. But they say a group of voters challenged that new map, stating that voters had unlawfully been sorted by their race in violation of the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection. So a 3-panel judge, according to The Guardian, agreed with those plaintiffs, blocked the new map from going into effect last year. Then that decision was paused by, I believe, the Supreme Court, and then a remedial map was used for the 2024 last fall's election. So this ruling now could have implications in terms of how are you picking and choosing and manipulating your congressional districts. All right. And I really believe there needs to be a very there has to be no bias at all. But I don't like the idea of Republicans or Democrats going, okay, if we bring in this little city here, and if we take this town and we add it here, now we're going to be majority Republican or majority Democrat. I don't like that. I think that's ridiculous. Now, redistricting always happens with the census. All right, what's your population? What are your population? A lot of people are leaving California. They're going to Texas or Florida. A lot of people leaving New York going to Florida. Florida's going to have increase in numbers. You're going to have fewer numbers in New York, fewer numbers in California. So your number of districts you have is based on your population. So if the population changes, then the districts change. But I wish there was a way where these districts, were just equal square. I don't want to say equal square footage, square acreage, or where there's a rhyme or reason as to why you have the northern county, you have a southern county, you have a middle county, but because they have to be based on population numbers, we're in this position here where they're like, well, we have to make sure there's plenty of population. So why don't we take Dodge City and you take River Bend City, and this ends up then being a manipulation of our congressional districts. We want black voters, Latino voters, white voters. We want everybody to have a vote. But the manipulation of congressional districts can unfortunately hurt that either way. And when people think, well, gosh, what Virginia did is going to help. It's going to help the Democrats. It's going to help. Any act like they did with that, or with what happened in Louisiana, could then later be turned around and hurt the same population. The reason why we have the Voting Rights Act, the reason why we have the 14th Amendment, the reason why we've gone through such trials and tribulations is to ensure that nobody could ever say a black community can't have access to voting, or a Latino community, or white. We did this so that it was there's no debate. If you're at all using race, no, can't do it. But is somebody going to, under the guise of redistricting and gerrymandering in terms of political affiliation, could they do that? I think there could still be manipulation. I think there could still be bias. But we want everybody to have a vote. And every county, every city, they have different needs. And I really don't think a rural town in California has the exact same needs as metropolis San Francisco. And to lump all those together, it really does affect people's votes. And that's what we're seeing in California, where they're trying to redistrict and get rid of some of the more rural Republican. We saw that with Virginia. Now Florida is going to also evaluate theirs so that they can then temper the loss of seats that Virginia and California is doing. It's a mess. I don't like gerrymandering. I don't like it at all. I understand with patient populations you have to reconfigure, but there's got to be a better, more legitimate way where it looks objective, it looks less biased, And so with the Supreme Court stepping in saying, no, you can't handcraft a congressional district that discriminates. Now you start to wonder what's going to happen with Virginia, with Texas, with, now, Texas is saying we didn't discriminate because we actually gained, we gained minority, shall we say, predominance in some of these districts and things like that. So there should be, I think, some oversight to ensure that nobody's getting screwed. I usually like government out of it, and I want the states to manage what their state needs. But sadly, we're seeing a lot of people within these states not have a voice. And this could just get worse and worse and worse. If there's only one Republican district in the whole state of Virginia, come on. Now, maybe that's what they have to do. They have to do an amendment. Maybe there needs to be an amendment that you have at least, shall we say, equal represent. If a state that gerrymandered falls under, 40% representation for a main political party, it needs to be reevaluated. And maybe we need to do something like that. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOCDALI.
Hey guys, it's Clyde. We've had a lot of requests for Ground Zero merchandise, so we put together an online store with a big variety of high-quality items. I'm really excited to let you know about these things. We have a lot to offer you and your loved ones. In addition to our regular apparel, such as t-shirts, beanies, hoodies, and hats, we've expanded our product line with posters, flags, aprons, mugs, and a whole lot more. We also have Ground Zero collectibles, along with a limited edition of items like a Clyde Lewis canvas portrait, a Ground Zero embroidered jacket that will certainly make for great gifts and for interesting conversations with family and friends. And we now offer publications such as Ron Patton's book about mind control, MK Zine, and back copies of the official magazine of Ground Zero while it was in print. Paranoia, the Conspiracy Reader, also coming in 2023, are updated and revised books that I've written. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. So shop today at our official store by going to groundzeromerch.com. Again, that's groundzeromerch.com.
Hey, America. How tired are you of mainstream corporate media's biased narratives and manipulated news? Their dishonesty and attempts to influence this generation have been exposed, put on display for anyone who's even half paying attention. But the New American Magazine has been an honest source of news and commentary for over 50 years. This is your opportunity to receive the stalwart of principled journalism at a deep discount. Picture a beautifully published magazine arriving at your doorstep twice a month, packed with insightful stories written with integrity. It's also available digitally on the New American's mobile app. Get up to speed with intelligent coverage from a freedom perspective. Right now, for a limited time, the New American is available to radio listeners at a 25% discount on a new subscription. Visit thenewamerican.com/radio25 and receive 25% off. Subscribe today at thenewamerican.com/radio25.
We're back on the Dr. Dahlia Show, 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOCDALI. So there's a lot of buzz about birth control pills being deemed carcinogenic. That if somebody takes a birth control pill, they're going to be at higher risk for cancer. So online, people are freaking out. Apparently, the International Agency for Research on Cancer at the World Health Organization has listed common birth control pills could be carcinogenic. This is nothing new. All right, and I'll explain. I don't want people freaking out, but we've always known this. When I went on the pill in, the 90s, I remember they said you could get a liver tumor. The estrogen could increase persistence of HPV if you have it. Thank God I never had HPV, but they said that's why we're doing your pap smears, because we're putting you on birth control and we want to make sure, we're protecting you against, cancer-related risks, liver tumors. If you have an estrogen-sensitive type of breast cancer, taking estrogen compounds could increase your risk. So this is nothing new. It's just the way the media is talking about it is kind of scaring everybody. In 2008, the IRAC, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, released its report on combined oral contraceptives, which determined that the female birth control pills were a group 1 carcinogen. Now, this placed them in the hazard classification, including tobacco, alcohol, and asbestos. Now, the classification was made, over a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago. But now people are kind of freaking out that, oh, gosh, we're just hearing about this now. We think about a quarter of women are using birth control pills. And there's 3 different types. There's multiple different types, but you have the progesterone only, you have the estrogen and progesterone, which were the most popular. And then you have types of birth control where you could, in terms of the pills, where you could extend them and not allow yourself to have a period. And, there's been a lot of debate. I know a lot of doctors are like, I think they should at least have a period. The studies are showing that it's safe for you to, temporarily stop your periods. What I, though, recommend is for anybody who, let's say, is having abnormal periods and they're young, they're 12, 13, 14, they go on birth control to normalize them. Before they decide to start their family, make sure we address any underlying issues, because if they're having period issues, that could suggest a fertility issue in some cases. So we want to definitely not kick the can down the road. If somebody is having abnormal periods and they're 12 or 13, let's figure out why. Many times people are going online saying, let me just put them on a birth control. Well, yeah, that's nice. But then when they're 25, 26, or now 30, and they're like, why can't I get pregnant? It'd be nice for someone to figure out what happened. Was it a thyroid issue? Was it, polycystic ovarian syndrome? So I recommend at least getting an evaluation for that. And so, contraceptives have been used, for decades now to protect, from pregnancy to, address menstrual issues. But there has been evidence that they cause cancer of the breast, in situ, and invasive cancer of the uterine cervix, and cancer of the liver. Now, we do think they are protective as it pertains to ovarian cancer. In fact, there's even some studies saying it might even protect against colorectal cancer. Endometrial cancer, a little tricky. Okay, if you're taking the combined, yes, it can decrease the risk. If you're on an estrogen only, which we usually don't do, we don't give you estrogen only birth control, it could worsen. Where we worry more about endometrial cancer or lining of the inside of the uterus is when we're doing postmenopausal hormone therapy. If you're just on estrogen without that progesterone, you could get endometrial cancer. So we have to make sure you have estrogen and progesterone. If you've had a hysterectomy and you don't have your uterus anymore, then you could be on estrogen only. So according to, let me give credit where credit is due, this is Newsweek reporting on this. They say the IARC's 2008 classification that was shared with Newsweek says there is sufficient evidence for that, and that the class 1 classification right now holds, but they could change that. And here's my thing with it: whether somebody classifies it or not, the issues with birth control are still there. They're fairly safe, but you can get blood clots. I mean, you can get pulmonary embolism. We had a young girl patient whose OB gave her birth control, like many OBs do. And then I found out one night that she went to the hospital. She had multiple pulmonary embolisms of blood clots in her lungs, and she ended up dying. And so, birth control can carry that risk. I recommend that, if you do suspect that there's an issue with blood clots in the family, you do a testing, a hypercoagulability profile to see if you are prone or at risk, because if you are, then you might not want to be on birth control. We've also seen a risk of stroke and heart attack, especially in women who smoke. taking birth control. So we don't really like you taking estrogen-related birth control if you smoke, even progesterone-related. Some people might have weight issues or weight changes, loss of sex drive, breast changes, depression, anxiety. There's even been some gallbladder issues that we've been hearing about. But, liver tumors, that's been a risk we've always known about. So, where do we go from here? Well, again, these risks were always there. This isn't anything new. I don't think anybody should panic about that. I think everybody who is going on birth control should understand there's risks. The big difference we have now is people don't get birth control from their doctor anymore, or their nurse practitioner or PA. The majority of them now are getting them from a provider they never met or online. And so the conversations aren't happening. And there's been a lot of changes in terms of going in for pap smears. But interestingly, birth control pills, if you've been on them for over 5 years, could have an increased risk of cervical cancer. They think what it does is it makes it harder for the body to clear human papillomavirus, or HPV. That could lead to higher rates of persistent infection, allowing HPV to change the cervical tissue into cancer. They also believe that the estrogen and progesterone in the pills can bind to HPV DNA sequences, encouraging the expression of viral oncogenes, which can trigger tumor growth. Plus, they can increase your cervical ectropion, where the cervix is more vulnerable to HPV infection, and then therefore allow HPV to attach and take more advantage. So I'm not saying if you go on birth control, you're going to have cancer. Not at all. In fact, I have never had a patient who was on birth control that developed cancer from the birth control. Now, 1 in 8 women getting breast cancer, do we think it was from their birth control, or do we think it's from age and their own body's estrogen? We know that there's a risk with birth control, but I think there's other things that are attributing to what we're seeing in terms of cervical cancer and breast cancer. But if you need birth control, you need it. I mean, that's just, but if there are safer forms, if your doctor finds that the progesterone only works well for you, or the IUD, I like the IUD because you don't have as much systemic absorption of hormones, things like that. There's things that could be done, and if you are prone to cancer, you're concerned about birth control, vasectomy, condoms, you're not getting the vasectomy, but your partner getting a vasectomy, right? Condom use. I mean, there's other options. So don't panic. This is something, like I said, when I read the article, I'm like, well, yeah, of course, birth control's been, that is unfortunately in some medical circles classified as such. But yes, there's a risk of cancer. That's just, alcohol. When you drink alcohol, that's carcinogenic. Alcohol can cause cancer. So I don't know if it's on the label. I mean, we know cigarettes have that on the label, but in terms of alcohol, So these are things we already know about. Don't panic, but I'll keep you posted if we have any new information on it. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOC-DALI.
Looking for an easy read that can actually help secure someone's future? Pick up a copy of Mark Falter's book, Common Sense Income Strategies. For the past 30-plus years, Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. It's not rocket science, it's a pretty easy read. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. Common Sense Income Strategies is available now on Amazon or by calling 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Common Sense Income Strategies by Financial Fitness Show host Mark Falter. Secure your financial future today.